You've got the senior advisor, they're going to retire, and they might have an assistant or two that's with them, but they're not really talking about the war on talent that's out there.
The most valuable element of an advisor's existence is their time, right? And none of us have enough of it.
You really need to think beyond the transaction or the partner as to who long-term are going to be caring for these clients and who is the best fit for that.
Welcome to the Total Succession Show. I'm your host, Tyson Ray, joined by Kim Cochenour. We're glad you're here. Subscribe at totalsuccession.com/podcast and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. Today's conversation just might be the nudge you need to start preparing for what's next.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Total Succession Podcast. Today's episode is with someone who's seen both sides of what we talk about here, what it takes to build a practice from the ground up, and what it looks like to support other advisors as they help plan their next move. We're talking to Alex Goss. He is the co-founder and co-CEO and managing partner of NewEdge Advisors. Before that, he and his dad built their own firm, Goss Advisors, into an $8 billion RIA. That eventually became a part of NewEdge Capital Group and rebranded it into now what's NewEdge Advisors.
And plus, he isn't we have the same roots going back to the A.G. Edwards days, and the there's a bond amongst those alumni of that firm that got destroyed, and so I'm just happy to have him on.
Oh yeah, no, I remember when I first joined. I mean, you were kind of a legend at A.G. Edwards. I remember when I was going through training at in St. Louis, and you were kind of the poster child of how to succeed in the business. So,
oh, that's high praise, Alex. I'm sure Tyson loves hearing that as he sits there slightly pink in the face. So
they were bringing us in to just try and remind people to do what's right for the client.
Yeah, I know.
Shocking.
What a shocking,
right.
Crazy secret to success, right?
Yeah, for you listening, there's all the reason right there why we had Alex on here. So thank you, Alex, for being here. Let's kind of jump in and help set the stage for people who don't go back with you like Tyson does. You talk a lot about the advisors all across the country, and it kind of you have the optics to kind of look at some of the trends. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. What trends are you seeing right now, and what's shifting in how advisors are thinking about their future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think from a very high level, and I've said this to a lot recently. We're not supposed to. The past is no indication of the future, right? But it is, right? And it does seem history does seem to repeat itself in a lot of ways. And I think what we're seeing now, right, is the beginning of a new cycle that kind of really ended in, call it, 2012, 2013. So if you think back pre-2008, right, and to some extent pre-2002 and 3 before the dot-com crash, you had 30 or 40, what you used to call regional broker-dealers or regional firms out there that advisors, generally speaking, were very happy with. They felt like it was a family. Obviously, A.G. Edwards is near and dear to Tyson and my heart. But there was a lot of those A.G. Edwards out there, right? There was A.G. Edwards, Prudential, Smith Barney, Morgan Keegan,
Baird.
ICA, Baird. Morgan, Merrill Lynch was totally different, right? It's Bank of America now. It's not Merrill Lynch. It was Merrill Lynch. So you had all these options, and advisors had a lot of choice, of where they could join and who they could be with. And it's not like every advisor it's not like all of a sudden advisors over the last 3 years just wanted to be business owners and be independent. Same types of advisors. They were just really great firms and platforms and chassis that advisors could affiliate with. They felt like they were running a business. They felt like those firms put the advisors first, and that allowed the advisors to put their clients first. And '08 and '01 changed that. Really, '08 in a moment, right? You went from 30 or 40 firms to 5 options, right? And for the first time, advisors started feeling like they didn't matter anymore, or their institutions didn't care about them. And I think that really ushered in the independent space, not necessarily because every advisor wanted to be, their own business owner and choose every business decision and run payroll. And that wasn't what was driving it. It was just the only option that they had. relative to what had happened in the industry. So you saw independence really grow. And then from there, I think a lot of advisors realized that the 1099 space wasn't necessarily independent. Um, it was just a different employment version. Uh, and then so the REA space really started taking off. And over the last 10 or so years, I think what you've seen is kind of the reemergence of the regional broker dealers
Mm.
coming out through the REA chassis or space. And you're starting to see for the first time in a long time, um, you know, choice again. There's probably 20 or 30, there's probably 100 firms out there trying to do it. There probably will only be 20, 30, or 40 firms that survive in the next, 5 or so years. But if I think advisors again have a lot of choice. They can be fully independent. They can be their own RIA, or what you're seeing is kind of this migration back to, hey, I don't necessarily want to be completely by myself. I want to be part of a group of advisors that looks and feels like me, that feels like a family at the firm that takes care of me. And so that's what we're seeing happen is kind of migration back to these firms of relatively significant size and scale that have national presence, and advisors are looking for that place that allow them to really take care of their clients, be successful, get to that next level without having to do everything and anything, while still feeling like they matter and that ultimately it's their clients and their business. So that's kind of broad strokes what I see happening. And I think we're all Tyson. Obviously, you've been part of that wave, so have I. And we don't see that wave crashing or slowing down at any point in the near future.
Yeah, I love that you said that because in a different if you've listened to these podcasts, you've heard me kind of bring up the fact that it feels very much like regional firms are starting to resurface out of necessity, right? There's advantages to this, and there's a disadvantage being rolled up into one of those major 5 prisons that still exist, and that's why we're having you on. That's why we're talking about succession. And that's why we're trying to help you, the listener, understand what these options even look like.
Yep, exactly.
So, Alex, kind of with that mindset of you're seeing advisors wanting to have and kind of that larger team feel, some of that support, are you seeing that being driven by burnout from running everything and doing anything on their own? Or are they doing it more from a succession lane? Like, I need to have a plan so I can exit eventually?
It's probably more. I mean, it's both, but it's for different reasons. I think the majority of it is the former, and I think it's advisors saying, "Hey, look, you know, I want to be at a place," and we've all kind of realized this. If you have gone independent, even if you're a fairly large practice, scale matters, and having additional resources is important, and they're expensive, right? So if you can find and kind of partner with a firm that has a lot of that, so you don't have to do it yourself or recreate the wheel, there's a lot of benefit and there's a lot of time saving to that. I think that's one of the things that the most valuable element of an advisor's existence is their time, right? And when none of us have enough of it, right? And I think that's something we're all trying to figure out. Is there a situation that can give me more time to do what I love doing and what I'm really good at doing? And I think that's where this choice is kind of coming up. Is advisors say, "Hey, look, I went independent and that was great, but now I'm spending a ton of time doing all these other things that never made me successful in the first place, right? And great, I have total control, but I have less time. So is there a way where I can have more time, the same amount of control, and a place that really kind of treats me like I want to be treated,
Hmm.
um, then that's exciting." I think the other thing too is that a lot of us were successful in those previous firms because we shared ideas with each other, right? And we collaborated, and the loyalty and the culture of those firms wasn't necessarily advisor to senior leadership. It was advisor to advisor. And the fully independent RA space has lost a lot of that. So I think advisors are, if they can, I always used to say the best idea I ever got at a conference came from, a lunch table, with another advisor, not from the stage. So I think advisors are looking for that and they're excited to find that again. And that's kind of driving it. And yeah, I think they're burned out, not necessarily being financial advisors. They're burned out in doing all the other things that's required to, support being a financial advisor.
Well, and I'm currently continually working on my PhD in hard knocks because I think an advisor's career professional progression is to end up independent, is to end up free. And the PhD I got in the School of Hard Knocks was just the process of trying to set up and do your own RAA and learning all the things you didn't know, and the months it takes to actually set that up and figure all those things out. And then to your point, then realize, okay, now you got another day or two of your week to actually then be managing and running things that were done for you, is where uh, having that figured out and having other partners to consider may allow you to have that professional progression without some of the headache, because you can do it yourself, or you can roll up under somebody like NewEdge that can help do a lot of the back office headaches for you. And so that's why we're having Alex on today, to help you understand what these options look like, whether it's you're successful and you just want to be free, or you're coming and realizing you're successful, but now you need to figure out how to create that legacy of the firm and take care of clients and find that succession plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and Alex, I think it was interesting how you brought into it not just being around burnout, but advisors realizing the value of their time and the true ironing, sharpening iron and collaboration that you can get from like-minded advisors as you continue to grow your practice. And that doesn't have to be something you do when you forge out completely on your own and you're kind of on your own island. And so, like Tyson said, I think it it would be helpful for those listening to kind of understand, if they're new to New Edge, what does it actually look like when an advisor would want to kind of decide to join or look into New Edge? What experience, in your experience, would make someone a good fit for looking into New Edge or partnering with New Edge?
Yeah, and maybe before I talk specifically about New Edge, just again, kind of like I said, there's 30 or 40, like why that, because we're one of those. It's just like you were saying, Tyson, like people wanted freedom, right? And for a while, the only way to get quote unquote freedom was to do it all, right? It was to be your own RIA. I think now people are realizing there's a path to the same amount of freedom without having to do all of that. I mean, an RIA in a lot of ways is not that much different than a broker dealer. In theory, any one of us can start a broker dealer if we wanted to. There's not a bunch of people out there starting broker dealers, right? Because it doesn't make sense, because it's too much work and effort, time, regulatory risk, yeah, technology and effort to run something just to support, what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. And I think the RIA space is kind of moving in that direction. It's it's becoming just as complicated, just as difficult. Um, so that's now there's an option, right? For some people it makes a lot of sense to start an RA and be an RA, and for those people that fit in that bucket, you absolutely should. It's not like everyone should join a firm and no one should be their own RA. There's definitely a place, um, and a reason to do it. But I think people are joining firms like New Edge because they realize that their business and what they're trying to do is service clients and find clients and access products, solutions, technology, and enhance, whatever they're able to, to do for their clients. And you don't have to be your own RA to do that. And that doesn't mean you're sacrificing freedom, ownership, optionality, um, you know, by joining a firm like ours. And so the real reason you should join us or one of these other firms is you need to look at, like, what does New Edge represent? What do these other 20 or 30 firms represent? And you can now have your cake and eat it too. You can
It's true.
look at a New Edge and you can check every box, right? And if every our goal is not to sell somebody to join us. Our goal is to present who we are, and it's your job to check the boxes. And if all those boxes check, then great, you probably fit with us. If they don't check, there's other people that probably do check that box. And I think that's a really good place. And I think that's something advisors should understand now is you can have your cake and eat it too right now. Don't sell yourself short, and don't join some place just for the money. or for the sales pitch, dig in, really have your list of things that matter to you, and spend the time and effort to make sure that as you're looking at the firms and the options out there, that you find the place that checks, pretty much all of those, not just a few handful, right? Because that was the option before. Was there's four firms, and some of these like big firms like Dynasty and Focus, that started out in the beginning, and it was kind of worked for some, it didn't work for others. So I start my own RA, right? You don't have to do that anymore. There's those firms that for some people, there's a lot of other ones that fit for others as well.
Something I think would be helpful is when someone does decide if they're new to the idea of new edge and they're trying to figure out how do they begin like the integration part? What does that even look like? Would they lose their own brand, their own colors, their own email, their own website? Because there are some firms out there that you get in and you get swallowed into all of it and you look like every other branch that's all the way across the country. Or there's other ones where you can maintain some of your own identity while getting some of those areas of support.
Yeah, I think that's a big differentiator between who NewEdge is and some of the other firms and our competitors out there. Is at our core, our DNA is supporting independent business owners, right? So we built the firm around the idea that there's a lot of larger successful teams that probably could be their own RIA, but maybe we'd all be better off if we did it together and kind of centralize and use economies of scale. But you own your business, I own my business, you brand your way, they're your clients. This is more about partnership and being better together than being, on our own. So
Mm,
that was the core, philosophy and belief around who, what Cost Advisors was, which ultimately merged into NewEdge. So um, in 2020, we started to realize two things from our advisors. One, they needed additional resources, specifically in the ultra high net worth space, and two, some of them did have succession or M&A, objectives. So we went out and decided, not we didn't create a business model just to buy. There, like you mentioned, there's a lot of firms out there that their entire business model and their entire purpose for being is our firm is what's special. We will go buy you and we will put you through the meat grinder and you will come out and you will look like every other advisor in our firm, right? And
yeah.
that's not necessarily a bad model, but
No.
that's the model, right? And a lot of firms that do that either are looking for a firm to help them become successful, or they're truly on their way out and they don't really care. And they're like, look, I'm retiring. I want to sell my business and I'll let you figure out how to run this in the future. That were the opposite, right? So in 2020, we merged with Rob Sechin, who's my co-managing partner, had a company called Turnstone, focused in the ultra high net worth space. So we merged our two companies together. That's what NewEdge Capital Group is. And we basically have two divisions. One is built really for advisors that are looking for ultra high net worth, very deep intellectual capital resources. Their clients are very wealthy people or very complex institutions that need extremely in depth, deep intellectual capital, planning, estate, access to private investments, those kind of things. And then New Age Advisors is your more kind of entrepreneurial type advisor, still very large and successful, but they kind of have what they need already in house, and they're
Okay.
looking for, more kind of operational support and back office support to help them kind of continue to execute on what they're already doing. In both channels, we have fully independent advisors, and we have advisors that had a need for, succession or M&A activity, right? And so for those that needed it, we have capital to go in and buy them or help them buy practices. And for the ones that we're engaging with in through some kind of acquisition, there is more of a co-branded element. But that's because it only makes sense. We can't go out and just give people money, to do whatever they want with, right?
Yeah.
We have to have a consistent story and a consistent use of that capital. So for those that kind of perfectly aligned with what we're trying to do with our capital, we partnered with them,
Okay.
in a lot of co-branded or branded methodology. But our deal
Wow.
is still leave you alone. Like you're successful and you're special. Like we're not trying to change what made you unique, but we
Mhm.
do have to have some consistency and client experience and the way we're going out and buying other, practices, because that's, what makes that capital use really, really powerful.
I have some really good friends that I would view as really successful that have rolled up into NewEdge and are pleased that they did. And if you're listening to this, it's succession isn't just about waiting to the end to find what that solution looks like. Because some of my colleagues that have rolled up into NewEdge are even younger than I am. It's taking their business to another level and leveraging resources in the independent space. And so it's a both and. This isn't the end of your career necessarily to be exploring these things. It's something to view as maybe breaking free of some of the old firms, if I could call them that, or the firms that think the clients are theirs. I think that's a better way of framing it. To institutions in this regional mindset of choice and culture and the opportunity to basically have partners in helping you with the clients that you want to work with.
And I think that's perfect. That's exactly right. Right. And I think, like, for us, like, our average advisor age is 49. So we have a very young advisor demographic. We will not buy somebody getting out of the business. Right. We don't manage clients. I just,
Hmm.
like you said, like, I believe firmly that a corporation trying to manage clients is not a long-term bet I'm going to make. Right. So
Hmm.
we believe that the advisor client relationship is unbelievably important, the most important thing. So if we're doing an acquisition, you have to have a long track record. I mean, a long career runway, to be in the business. Now, what we do see a lot, though, is there are a lot of multi-generational practices, right? Where you have, G1, G2, G3 in a practice, and, that there might be some advisors that do need to get out of the business in 1, 2, or 3 years. And that's been a challenge because as the valuations of businesses have gone up, right, the ability for G2 to buy out G1 has become harder and harder. So what's the choice, right? You either, as a G1, sell at a significant discount to G2, or the other options where, sorry, G2, I'm going to sell this to so and so, the meat grinder, and you're kind of screwed. I'm getting my liquidity, but you're an employee, and your chance to make money in the future is over. So we've tried to thread that needle. We're able to kind of help the G2s buy out the G1s, still maintain ownership of their business, still have their own future upside for a liquidation event down the road. But they have to be the right type of G2 that's able to make sure that when G1's gone, they're still growing the business. They're still excited about growth. They still, they want to work with us to help, grow their business through other M&A deals where we might buy out a one man, one woman, you know, retiring shopping and give it to that G2, because I know that G2 is going to do a great job of that business. That's where we're kind of trying to thread the needle. So yeah, so I think that's that. Our goal is acquisition for growth, not acquisition for retirement. But sometimes they're embedded in the same practice, and you have to solve for the retiring advisor to help the growing advisors continue to grow and be incented to continue to grow.
Well, and there's a differentiator there because there's many of these 20 plus, may I call them regional RAs that are rolling up, that several of them, they want to buy out I have a friend that took a very big check, and 12 months later, his team was let go. It's basically just him servicing the clients. When he's gone, it's going to be a care team or a call center or whatever, because that's the way some of these other RAs are justifying the dollars they're paying out, is because they're going to do a one-to-many advisor servicing hundreds of clients, and that more money may not be worth it in the end based on how that you're leaving these clients, because they're all selling something that's really not theirs, right? It's clients' money, and how are they going to be cared for when you run into them at the social event or the golf course or church or wherever they are, because your clients are your friends. You really need to think beyond the transaction or the partner as to who long-term are going to be caring for these clients and who is the best fit for that.
Exactly, and that's kind of my point. I probably can guess. I can probably give 3 guesses and figure out who that firm was, but 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 yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bet long term on that, because I don't think that. Um, again, I think the client relationship is an advisor client one, and you can't just give some relationship to some person somewhere and just expect that to be, you know, handled in the same way. Um, in some instances, yeah, that's the model, right? And if an advisor doesn't care or doesn't have any other options and they want to maximize their valuation and they are going to be out of the business in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, that has been an attractive option for those
Option, yeah.
practices. Not necessarily an attractive option for the end clients or the G2 that all got let go in that same example. And that's why, I think people have seen that and why they're coming to us and some of the other competitors that are helping solve for long term solutions that are good for the client and the residual staff. But also, I will say, in a lot of ways, the institutional capital, kind of the PE world, is in some ways the new upfront check that you used to, we always hear about in the wirehouses. You always hear about the chase checkers. Like that's happening here too now, right? That's kind of been replaced, or it's not. There's still big checks in the wirehouses too, but that's happening here. Is that a lot of advisors, not a lot, but there are a number of advisors that they don't really care. And at the end of the day, who's giving me the most money? And that's where you're seeing them go. I think a big differentiator there that they need to be careful about is these aren't 5, 6, 7, 10-year loans that forgive and then you can go somewhere else. This is permanent money. This is a permanent deal. And those big checks are the end. So, a lot of people think, oh, I'll just take this and we'll figure it out. They don't realize how serious that decision is and how permanent it is, relative to a wirehouse, forgivable loan.
Well, and I think some of those firms too are running some of the big RAs. They're playing that model out of the one to many are run the risk of the clients voting with their feet and finding an advisor they can still, eyeballs to eyeballs, kitchen table conversations, the ability to have a relationship again, may come back to haunt them.
Just wait for a 12 to 18 month difficult market and see what happens. That's pretty much. I mean, we've been running on the wave of strong markets, and we had 2022, which was a little bit frightening, but that was, it kind of resolved itself pretty quickly there. So, you have a little bit of long term instability in our market. I think you're going to have a massive shakeup in with those business models. Huge opportunity for advisors that the successful advisors to start taking those assets.
Sure.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. Well, and Alex, I think it was really helpful to hear you talk a little bit about that differentiating factor of making sure there's the G2, G3 in place. Because I think what's getting more of the conversation space these days is that you've got the senior advisor, they're going to retire and they might have an assistant or two that's with them, but they're not really talking about the war on talent that's out there for practices who want to have that legacy stay to have that G2, G3 retention. And so to have an organization like NewEdge that's actually interested in pursuing those kinds of partnerships is a huge benefit because I don't think that there's enough of that out there because that's just not where I think the big paychecks, that's more of the long-term vision or the long-term success of the client advisor relationship in the succession space, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's where growth comes from, right? I mean, we're
Mm.
not interested, and I think the smart money is starting to wake up to that. We're not interested in client retention. We're interested, and if you see where valuations, like it used to be at AUM and a pulse, somebody would buy your practice.
Yeah.
Now, it's everybody's woken up to it's net new money. Like who's growing
Yep.
their business net of the market. Succession and creating a really valuable business isn't just about having somebody there underneath you that's younger than you to be there to retain the clients. It's what's the continuing growth story of your business if you retire. And I think that is really important, for us or for anybody that's out there. Like, the G2 isn't just a junior salaried advisor. It needs to be somebody that you feel like is highly capable of building a business, running a business, growing a business, being a senior leader.
Mm.
Retention, that's kind of the business model that we were just talking about. Like they sell the business and, can all these people retain the clients? Maybe, sure, for a little while. Are they out there in the community growing the business? No, right? And that's I think the focus needs to be more on what is the real growth story of this business. Is it going to continue to grow after so and so leaves, or are there people that are there that are going to be here for 5, 10 plus years that are going to continue to grow the business, or is this just you know a dying asset that is going to you know client attrition out over their withdrawals and distributions and no growth over the
Mhm.
next 10 years?
Yeah, it's a big part of that. So I think that kind of leads naturally into the conversation about structuring of these deals. Because I think a lot of that does depend on if you're just getting a big check and you're leaving, if you have a team that's being retained, if you are leaving behind that advisor that's going to continue to grow the practice. So, what are you seeing in the space, or how are you seeing deals structure changing as the landscape is shifting?
Yeah, I think the valuations are relatively the same. Um, I'm very hesitant when you hear these crazy valuations. Like they're never real. It's just like the upfront checks. Oh, I'm gonna give you 5 times your upfront money. That's if you grow 25% a year and do blah 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 blah. And that's really not 5 times your money, because if you take actually your growth, it still ends up being, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 times or whatever. So the valuations, I mean, oh, we're gonna pay you 15, 16 times. That's you know, if you grow and if the equity you get grows and all these other things. Generally speaking, the valuations are going to be somewhere between, 7 and 11 times your sellable profit. And I think people need to understand what sellable profit or EBITDA is, right? Like advisors a lot of times forget about their replacement cost being a actual expense of the business, right? So if you sell your business, somebody is buying it and they're going to buy it for a certain amount of profit that they expect to keep and maintain. They're not going to keep that and then give it back to you, right? So you're you or somebody else has to get paid to continue to run those clients. So that owner compensation is actually an expense that people try to, oh, I'm a $5 million producer. I make $3 million a year after my expenses. You know, just simple math of 10 times my business is worth 30. No, it's not because you got to pay yourself at least $1 million a year to stay on. So it's really the 2 million times 10. So it's a $20 million business, right? So people forget that the valuations kind of are all the same. Be careful of these like inflated, multiples or pie in the sky total deals. Those are not as real as they are communicated. The structure can be different, right? I mean, there's the I don't care. Here's the check. You can stay or leave. We don't care deal. That's one. Um, there's the structure that we're building in that are more kind of you know we can help take out senior or G1, but G2 still maintains ownership in the business and has upside and can sell their share back to us at some point in the future. So they have their own kind of liquidity event. You've got groups that are coming in and taking quote unquote minority interest. Um, but again, be careful of minority because they try to confuse people a lot of times that, oh, if you own 51% of your business, you control your business. That's not true at all.
Mm,
What controls the business is the deal terms of the sale, right? So, that's the restrictive covenants. That's what you could have only sold 1% and lost total control of your business in theory, right? So,
mm,
um, now I saw it the other day. We had a business we were talking to, pretty sizable group. It only sold 18% to one of these groups. Oh, we control our business. They came to us. Hey, we want to join you. We like you. We want to sell or affiliate with you. You know. Oh yeah. I was like, well, are you sure you can? Yeah, definitely we can. We only sold a minority. They went and told their minority partner about what they were planning on doing. And "Oop, remember these legal documents over here? No, you can't do that. We have the right to restrict you from doing that. So, there's all sorts of structures out there. Um, I think important to note that when you're selling your business, you are selling it. There's not a cake. There's not a I'm going to sell my business, have total control over how I run my business going forward, still make the same amount of money as I was making before I sold my business, and never have to do anything that I don't ever want to do ever again. I mean, that's not true, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's
like
not
you just have
reality.
you gotta accept that if you're gonna enter into some type of transaction, you are giving up something. It's gonna be some element of control, some element of your profit, some element of probably how or how you run your business. I mean, there's gonna be an element of that with everybody. Dig in and understand that, because if anybody's telling you it's not, they're lying to you.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's what people have to realize. So, what's the most important thing? Making sure that you trust and like who you're joining, and that who you're joining and who you're affiliating with feels very, very aligned with who you are. And I always think the best way to identify that is not to listen to the senior leader. Well, I mean, you need to listen to the senior leadership and the salespeople, but after that, then go talk to 5 or 10 other advisors that are already there, and what do they say about the company, first and foremost, and two, do those advisors look and feel like you look and feel, right? And are you aligned with them? And if they look totally different than you, probably not the best place, right? Make sure you're finding a place where you kind of feel at home. Very important in this process.
I had another podcast guest on that specializes in valuations, and he accurately said, you can come up with any valuation you want. It's just what are the terms to get to the number that you wanted. And ironically, I was at a local fundraiser, and my wife was talking to another wife, and all of a sudden they found out we were doing what we do. And husband shows up and he sits down and he's like, sold the business 3 months ago. And I was like, oh, how's that going? And what you need to hear if you're listening to this with these valuations and you see these numbers, it's to just differentiate what are you really getting up front that is quote unquote guaranteed, and then what are these earnouts? And the problem with the
Yep.
earnout, or the thing to realize about the earnout, the warning I want to give you about the earnout is the pressure I saw of this gentleman who had a business for 3 decades is all of a sudden for the first time in decades, he's now worried about how much he's going to make and what conflict that creates in the business, what conflict that creates in the client's best interest, because it's millions of dollars if he hits these growth targets. And that was a pressure he never had on himself that now at the end of his career, he's having to put on himself because he got the valuation he wanted, but didn't realize the cost of that.
I was just say it's so spot on. It's two things. I mean, you know, the growth should be realistic. It should be kind of what you're already doing, right? First and foremost, like if you
Yeah.
got to be more than you're already doing, that's you know, ask yourself if you can do it. And the other side too is how much you're making, right? A lot of times to maximize the sale, advisors, some of these practices, oh yeah, okay, fine. You only want to make 5% of your revenue. We'll buy that. And that sounds great when the check cashes, but then, now you've gone from making, your $3 million producer making 60 or 70%. Now you're making a couple hundred grand a year. Like that, the incentive to get up in the morning, for that is not what it was when every new account you bring in is going to bring X amount of dollars to your pocket. So I think yeah, it's very important. You think about what does this mean? Because I agree. I think people that loved it are all of a sudden like, wait a second, what have I done?
And the other burden that he had is that because in normal deal structure, about a third of what he received was stock in this company, and it's illiquid. He has no control over it, and he's now also concerned about, will that even come to fruition? What is that going to end up looking like when he may ever get his opportunity to get some of those dollars back out? So it's very important to
Sure.
not get lost in the big number that gets presented to you if you're starting to explore a sale. It's much more important of who you're partnering with. What is your objective? Are you looking to get out? Are you looking to have uh, uh, the opportunity to grow and relieve some headaches? But be careful you don't put yourself in a different headache when you go through this
Oh
process.
yeah. And the equity thing's such another great point, and a component of this is not all equity is created equal. And a lot of these firms are showing guys like that or gals like that, this crazy multiple they're going to make on the equity, and that's going to be worth. That's why it's going to be a 20 times whatever sell, and that's just not necessarily true. Like I mean, I saw a group, one of our competitors, and they're like, "Well, this group's showing that their equity is going to return 18 times what what I get, and you're only showing 3, or whatever it was, or 2 over a
Yeah.
10-year period." And I was like, "Would you like me to show you 18? I can put 18." Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not real, like, I mean, I don't believe that if they can guarantee that, I'll sell my business to them tomorrow, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's not the case. Equity in the private equity world and what's happening, I mean, yeah, I mean, a good company that's built the right way, you should, they're looking to get, you know, from a initial investment in the company, they're typically looking to get a 3 to 8 times return on their stock over a 10-year period. 8 being the kind of knock it out the park, and 3 being things didn't go maybe as well as we expected. So if anybody's showing you, and more than likely, if you're getting equity in a company, you aren't day one. So if they're expecting, best case scenario to get an 8 times return or a 10 times return, and you're coming in halfway through the story, well, your best case, you're just not going to work. So you got to understand that, and and don't now make sure you understand the equity, make sure you understand the business model, because there are a lot of companies out there. They're we're just going to buy all these people, and somehow we're going to figure out how to make a company out of this, and then that's not a great story for the equity either, right?
No.
What drives equity value is consistency. It's a business model that has proven track record to bring on advisors. Those advisors grow, after they're on, that there's some type of understanding methodology behind the business. Those are the things, just an amalgamation of a bunch of advisors across the country doing whatever, maybe not growing isn't the best story for equity.
No, it's not. Well, and it sounds like it can be clearly a financially great option if all you're doing is considering the front end and you might be burned out and ready to be done. But the outcome could be very emotionally and mentally exhausting on the other end. And you probably didn't end up solving very many problems for yourself. You probably created more of a complication than you really intended. And so I think sometimes you might not be thinking about what life will actually look like after the deal is done. And so I think you might have a specific advantage in this conversation about talking about advisors on the post transition. They're 12, 18 months after they've partnered with NewEdge and the dust settles, they're kind of the reality of their new life is in motion. What are you hearing from people who join at NewEdge once that dust settles?
Well, New Edge is different because we don't want your life to change. Like we are investing in you or recruit or want you to be part of us because we think what you're doing is already special,
Mm.
right? And that's what makes us unique is our advisors are unique. So,
Mm.
it should just be all enhancement, right? If you join us,
Mm.
right? Like we're adding, and the reason you should join us is if what we have, you believe, would be additive to what you're already doing. So, there shouldn't be a change in your story or your day to day. It should, if anything, our mission statement is to give successful advisors more time. It should just be to give you, you have more time to do what you're already doing, really well. Um, I think it's, the bigger question is if you are looking to retire or get out of so we don't, if you're looking to get out of the business, you know, we're not going to invest in you unless you already have a good succession plan in place,
Mm.
right? So, um, you have to have strong G2 in place. There, like I'm not trying to create succession for you. We're
Yep.
trying to invest in practices or work with practices that already have that built. So it's a good question for those. If you don't have it, what are your options? And the reality is probably not a lot. Like if you're just by yourself, like the reality is you are going to have to sell to somebody else that's going to do it their way going forward. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Just make sure you find a firm that's way is, something that you would feel very proud to have your clients, experience, right? So if that's the case, that's fine. And people pay you a lot of money for your business. Just make sure that whoever's taking over is going to run your clients in a way that you can feel proud and happy about. Um, don't sell for just a big check. You can have both. If you aren't there yet and you're thinking about it and then you need to really start thinking about succession, right? Make sure you find a partnership, find a group that you can build in, like find something that doesn't necessarily mean hiring a junior. It probably means finding another firm that you can merge with that already has well-established, successful advisors. That's much better than trying to grow your own, in my opinion. Like find that really strong other younger you version, merge with them, try to figure out ways to work together, and collaborate, that hopefully enhances, the experience of your clients, but also dramatically enhances the value of your business because
Mm.
now if you're not just selling and going away and you're selling and you have a continuation story and a growth story, you're opening up the world of buyers to a lot more groups like ours, and we're going to pay a lot more money. It's just competition, supply and demand.
Alex was a sharp contrast compared to what a lot of the things that we're seeing in this space because truthfully, what we're hearing more and more of is that there's this big integration period. There is time when the dust settles. Things have to change. Your team has to change. There's a lot that kind of moves in a succession or a sale of their business. And so I'm really glad that you shared that's not the experience that you've built NewEdge to be, that you wanted to give advisors a place that they could be successful, and just have some of those enhancements and not feel like they're having to make a big 90-degree pivot so that they have a plan in place or additional tools and resources at their disposal. So I'm glad that was you're like, well, that's not our experience here. So I think that's really helpful for everyone to hear it that way.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. And if it is, you're probably going into one of those meat grinder firms that's going to, everybody's going to come out a hamburger. So, um, but now I will say this. I mean, some of the moves require somebody transitioning from a wirehouse and there is whether you're selling the business or just going to become 1099 or independent, there can be a transition or a change in how things operate just due to the different kind of way the world works. But that's not that difference or change has nothing to do with succession or M&A or selling. That just has to do with moving from one platform to the other. And there is some disruption. I don't want to minimize like the disruption that if you're leaving Wells Fargo and joining us or one of those firms, there's going to be some disruption. You're going to have to call your clients, move them, do all that, learn new systems, that type of stuff. But that's table stakes for, just moving.
Yeah, no, exactly.
If someone was listening to this and they want to reach out to NewEdge, how do they do that? And if you can talk a little bit, if the deal structure is right and the fit's right, what is that? What is that advisor experience when they make this shift?
Yeah. So it's, we're looking for lead advisors that already are very confident in what they're doing and, feel like we have something to help them better execute, and get to that, next level, whether you're ultra high net worth focused or you kind of have what you need and you're looking for, just, resources and time, we typically have a good solution for you. You can reach out, I guess to me or to, we have our head of growth, Neil Turner, generally is kind of the point person that kind of filters where, the path needs to go, whether it's you want to join as a 1099 or you want to do some type of transaction. Um, if it's a 1099 deal, we don't win on price, but we're pretty competitive on price. It's traditional, there's a payout and, some kind of structure. And our belief is we're going to be as competitive as anybody else out there with probably more value than you would get other places. And if it's a deal, then it really kind of depends on the deal. We don't want to have a cookie cutter deal. We want to have a customized deal to you and your unique situation. But generally speaking, it's going to be, like I said, somewhere in that kind of, 7 to 12 times range of whatever profit we're going to buy. And, the ranges of those things are going to be kind of driven by how much we're buying, right? The more we're buying, the more we're willing to pay because the amount of effort and time that goes into a bigger deal is just worth more. And then two, your growth, right? What's your growth story? If you are growing, you have a good growth story, or you really believe that by joining us, it's going to continue to accelerate your growth story. And we can kind of prove that we're going to be willing to pay more. If you're, yeah, and I just macro sense like what growth is, not just for us. If you're growing net of market over 6%, you're in the really good category. If you're between 3 and 6, you're in kind of the okay category, and if you're less than 3, then you may find it hard to at this point to find somebody that's interested in buying you, or at least leaving you alone. They're going to try to shove you into some system that's going to accelerate your growth.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Well, Alex, I just wanted to thank you for kind of helping bring the New Edge perspective to us listening today. I think that's be hugely helpful, and we'll make sure to link in the show notes for the team there at New Edge if they're interested in kind of furthering this conversation, and if they found it as interesting as we did, just to kind of get a little bit more of the peek behind the curtain about the differentiation that New Edge is really bringing to the shift in the space of the reemergence of all these larger firms for advisors to find a home and find that collaboration. So thanks again, Alex, for joining us today. It was great to have you.
Yeah, likewise, Kim and Tyson. Thanks so much for inviting me, and love connecting and having these fun conversations.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the takeaway goes back to the A.G. Edwards, which is it's the client first, it's the advisor second, it's the firm third, and if that is not what you're currently experiencing, NewEdge might be a solution for you.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll be back soon with more conversations like this.
Thanks, Alex.
All right. Thank you.
These conversations are designed to support your next move, however close or far it may be. Tap subscribe and let each episode guide you closer to a confident, well-planned exit. I've wrestled with these things myself, and that's exactly why I created something to help you do it with less stress and more direction. My book, Total Succession, is now available on Amazon. Inside, I break the process down into 5 clear steps to help you exit on your terms with confidence, full compensation, and your client's best interests at heart. You can also visit totalsuccession.com/podcast to download a free starter guide that walks you through my SPACE framework: see, prepare, act, commit, exit. Remember, you only exit your business once. Create the space to do it well. Thanks for listening. Until next time.